moment. All right, here we are. Live. All right, here we are. Hey everybody, it is good to see you all. Very excited to be able to do this particular topic tonight with not only one of my great friends, but also a person that I am so excited to be able to say I work with and see his gifting partner with us, obviously, in seeing Stone Creative Group move forward. So it is the one and only Tony Lunnon. And also having you on board for questions to help us take your story to a whole other level. One of the wonderful things about this whole process is, yes, it's about our story helping your story. So the topic of tonight was, what's your story? What story does your brain tell when you're not there to talk about it? And how to take everything you believe in, take all the clarity of culture and systems and processes and values and vision and mission and everything, and then talk about how does that tell a story through your brand. So let me give a couple of shout outs to everyone that's watching, and to those that are here. We've got people from obviously the Gold Coast, from Tasmania, from all over, and so from New Zealand as well. So welcome to everyone. I thought I would just give you guys a little bit of insight of what made this such an important journey for me personally as a leader and as an organizational strategist, is going out of my own little bubble to go and build something with someone who has a branding background. I committed a cardinal sin when it comes to branding, and that is, when you're leading and owning and running a business, one of the first things that we like to do is we like to think that we are the creative experts when it comes to making up your own brand journey, logo, and everything else. Now, I get it because I did it. And so to give you a little bit of insight, well over a decade now ago, I was traveling and I was speaking, not just within faith communities, but also in high schools. And I did kind of the high school circuit, and then I did not-for-profits. And of course, then I did churches and colleges and whatnot as well. But I did that as what we called Stone Ministries. So I came out of a particular pastoral kind of role, went and started speaking as a keynote speaker under the banner and brand of Stone Ministries. Of course, at that point, 12, 14 years ago, I did our own branding for that. And then, of course, I also worked with my very talented brother who actually studied his doctorate and just finished it recently. And his was about visual media, but it was more in line with video and production. So between the two of us, and I have a background in marketing and advertising, and communication. So I would think that between the two of us, we could put some pretty good brand journeys together. But actually, in actual fact, we did good logos, but we never really built a brand narrative. So from Stone Ministries, I then was traveling a lot full time. I would be booked out maybe 35 to 40, 42 weekends in a year. And that's when we started to do far more events. So we started to evolve that model from me traveling everywhere to doing monthly and quarterly meetings at City Hall in Brisbane. Because I wanted to separate those two things, Stone Ministries was what I traveled under, but when we did the events back home, we called it Stop, Breathe, Receive. Now, let me give you a little bit of background behind that. That phrase came out of me one day when I was doing a leaders and pastors, leaders, and marketplace conference. And I just said, all of us as leaders need to sometimes take a moment and just stop, breathe, receive, right? And then this guy comes up to me and says, hey, can I use that as a name of, like, you know, a blog or a newsletter? And I started to think, well, maybe that's a really good phrase. And I said, well, I use that. And so it became a name of these events. Now, those events, obviously, Stop, Breathe, Receive was something that I felt all leaders needed. We needed to take a space to stop, breathe, and receive because of the busyness of leadership. I get it. And so we started doing these events, and we had ABC radio personalities. We had vice chancellors from the university. We had guest speakers. We were just running these amazing events, and I loved doing it. But those were Stop, Breathe, Receive events. We would gather between 80 and 120 people into these boutique kind of contexts, and we'd put on an event for them so they could just receive. You know, leaders are so busy giving out all the time. So we went from just traveling to now doing these events. I was traveling and doing these events, and we started to call it SBR because Stop, Breathe, Receive is a little bit long. So SBR became the new shortened version of Stop, Breathe, Receive. Now, this is where it became very interesting. As we started to go on that journey, one of my mentors said to me, you should move into consulting because events don't grow big people. They don't just encourage leadership growth. You're not taking people on a journey. They're just events. And so we started this consultancy under a lot of great leadership, under a lot of great guidance. One of the people that mentored me into this journey and helped us frame it was a man by the name of Dr. Peter Little, who was the Deputy Vice Chancellor of the Queensland University of Technology, and a close friend of mine still to this day. And I still consider him a voice of wisdom in our organization. So he said, let's go into consulting. This is how we have to go. So I had to take a traveling ministry, an event-based organization that dealt with leadership and marketplace and inspiration and boutique events, and suddenly become a consultancy. Now, moving from that to a consultancy, I had to take these two things and kind of converge them and create something brand new. Now, like I said, I have an advertising and communications background, and I've got a lot of skilled people around me and graphic designers and people that are great at video production and media and all of those things. But I never had a branding person. And when we tried to do it, it came across as just nice logos until I met the man called Tony Lunnon. And as I was speaking, when I'd preach and speak and do my keynote presentations, he once looked at me when we had a decent enough relationship. And he said to me, he said, Andrew, who does your slides? Who does your slides, man? Like who designs them? And I went, me. I thought that they looked pretty good. I was quite happy with them. And he's like, can I do some slides for you? And I'm like, okay, you want to take over my slides? Anyway, I gave a lot of trust because anyone who has ever heard me speak knows I love my slides. They're like babies to me. And I handed these slides over to a Mr. Tony Lunnon, and he blew me away. And as we were consulting and as we were doing all these corporate things, and we created the Stone Creative Group, which brought everything together for us, I needed a new narrative. I needed a new brand. I needed a new story to tell that honored where we came from, but also created a trajectory for our future. And I realized, listen to me, if you are leading an organization or you're the CEO and you right now are the be all and end all of everything, whatever you do, don't design your own brand. Just trust me. Invest in your branding journey. And so I was speaking with Tony, and he said, let's do some things together. So we started to work on our brand. And obviously what you see now is the fruit of me trusting a Mr. Tony Lunnon. But to give you just a little bit of insight before I bring him into this interview, is I was already working with corporates. And as I was consulting people for clarity and change, as we were developing and working through their brand and their organization and their journey, what would normally happen within 6 months, 8 months, 12 months, because of our clarity, what we bring as a consultancy, we would shift their internal narrative. We would shift their internal story from how they saw their vision, their mission, their HR strategies, and their organizational strategies. That had changed and shifted so much in their culture that they would turn to me and go, what's our new story? How do we tell our new story to everybody, not just internally to our community, but to everyone else? And that's when I went, you know who you need to work with? You need to work with my friend, Tony Lunnon. And that's when we also created a creative agency under the Stone Creative Group that Tony Lunnon is such a huge pillar of in moving it forward. So without further ado, let me introduce you to my friend, Tony Lunnon. Why don't you just click right in there, my friend? It is good to see you, buddy. How you doing?
Yeah, doing good, brother. How are you?
I'm going good. I'm going good. I miss seeing you in person.
Oh my gosh, yes. From Brisbane City out to the burbs. It's
Right.
good to see you, man.
Yeah, right up to the burbs. Just so that you know, I fully respect the whole creative vibe you've got going in the background. You look like you're in a studio, ready to do some great and powerful branding for everyone. So, Tony, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Obviously, I know you well, but everyone who's watching doesn't. I thought, what would best introduce you? So, how did you get into being in creative, like in that space, and then narrow down into branding? What made you want to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was interesting that you mentioned SBR just a moment ago, because I don't know if you remember when we first talked, your brand was still SBR, and
that's right.
We went through a journey together of exploring what the SBR branding could look like. Which is now a bunch of files that will never see the light of day, and that's totally okay, because that's part of the journey.
It is.
But for me, we started talking at a very critical point in my journey where I had been working in IT for about 9-10 years, and really kind of felt that I was at this crossroads where I had to really follow a passion, and that was graphic design, that was being creative. My wonderful wife took that risk and allowed me to pursue that. I went back to university and got re-educated, and learned that everything that I needed to do, and started this whole new career in being creative. And look, it's been up and down, and obviously learning a new career is definitely a bit of a risk for anyone. But yeah, it's definitely proved to be a God move for me personally, in that everything has just been doors opening, and the relationship with yourself and the people that we're working with has just been absolute gold.
So really what you're saying, if I can catch it, is that you had this, whilst you were down one particular trajectory of life, be it even from a career point of view, you had this burning passion to say there's something creative, or there's something more in me that would serve people better if I went down this. And everyone knows that most people that are watching understand that it's a risk to follow passion, but somehow things line up when you do.
Yeah, absolutely. And for a long time there, I didn't actually know what that mode of creativity was called. I remember, strangely enough, being on holidays as a kid, and years later, the thing that I remembered from that holiday was the typeface and the signage on the side of the building. And I was able to say, "Oh, guys, do you remember that time we stayed at Mermaid Sands?" And they had like this blue text on the side of the building. And they looked at me, and it was like, what? Years later, we drove down that street, and like, no kidding, there was the words on the side of the building. It was obviously a bit smaller than I remembered.
Yes. Yeah.
But there it was. And I think that's like, my mind has always been drawn to things that are things like that create mnemonic references, and you follow that train down into branding and making things recognizable for people. And
Mm-hmm.
communicating a message in as little as possible, in as little time as possible.
So before we go to our next question for you, and I know it's going to help people, I want to give a big shout out to those that are watching. I can see the list of names of people just coming up. I want to appreciate the fact that you're here. Obviously, a big shout out to the Stone Creative Group team that are also here. If you have any questions about anything, from branding to social media to communications to having the idea where you're looking for clarity, even in your own journey as a leader, can you just put your question in there and we will make sure we get to you? And I can already see your sister making funny comments. She's already in something about a frozen chocolate bunny.
Yeah,
and,
so that holiday I just mentioned, yeah, there was some crazy things happen there.
Crazy thing. So let me ask you this. So when it comes to, we already know you're passionate about the function, or we know you're passionate about the creativity for yourself, but what do you love, or what makes your heart leap about helping people create, discover, or rediscover their creative story? So you found yours. What makes your heart leap about making other people find theirs?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's actually mostly about being part of that journey. One thing that I did learn from my years in IT was how much I enjoyed helping people find solutions.
Yeah.
Like more than necessarily the technical stuff, what I really loved was actually walking into an organization and being the guy that people ask questions and being able to provide a solution. And design, branding and graphic design is not entirely dissimilar. We're problem solving, and we're creating narrative around and putting words to things that aren't maybe as easy to communicate for somebody that's got a gift for business, you know. And so I enjoy being part of that journey. I enjoy getting into relationship with people and understanding who they are, what their company's about, their values and their ethos, and helping them communicate that. But then also getting to look back after the journey's done and being able to say, hey, that's something I was part of. I'm so proud to be associated, not just with that brand, but with those people that are doing an awesome job.
So you see, like, what makes your heart leap, as much as there is this beautiful story that we partner with and create, you see the relationship. You see a brand as being relational.
Oh, 100%. Like you think about just the logo in general, and it's the handshake between customer and company. You know, it's the first thing that a lot of customers see about your business, and why shouldn't it be? It's a conversation
feel
piece.
Like something, right?
Absolutely, it should evoke a feeling. Like, I mean, you look at the Coca-Cola logo, you think of something, and like you look at the Apple logo, you think of something. It's
absolutely.
It's obviously different for every person, but if you're communicating from a position where you're comfortable with your message, then you're on the right track.
I can tell you right now, there's particular brands that I'm loyal to. I've never met the CEO. I've never met anyone really from head office, but I'm loyal to that brand. There's places that I go to when I go to outlet shopping, no matter where I am in the world, and I feel guilty to walk into other brands because it's like, no, but that's my brand. I align myself with them. I'm connected to them. It's weird. I don't know why, and I don't know how, but ever since I was a little kid, there's particular brands that I've stayed with. And I'm like, I'll go into maybe other places, but it doesn't evoke the same thing. They're just items to me, but I feel a connection to others. So people that are watching this, people that are going to listen to this eventually on a podcast or rewatch this, most of them have some access or authority to create their own brand, building their own brand, especially in the midst of what we're going through. How can someone self-assess their brand and get a reality check right now on where and how effective their brand is? I mean, people are right now creating online brands, personal brands, professional brands. Things are changing. What would be your advice, or how would someone self-assess?
Yeah, that's quite massive. If you are looking at a brand, the first question that I usually ask as a designer is, do you have an operating brand or do you have a logo?
Yeah. Okay.
Unfortunately, today those two words are often used interchangeably when they
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
mean two different things. The logo is definitely an important part of the brand, but the brand, when you say brand, it covers so much more. You're talking about brand voice. You're talking about the brand identity, the brand culture, and so to say that your logo is your brand means that you are really falling short of communicating with your audience. So that's probably the first question I would start with. Do you have a brand or do you have a logo?
Okay, that's a good question to ask.
Yeah, absolutely. And the second one is, have you considered your brand in a while? Like, is it an old brand?
Yeah.
Especially this one refers mostly to like brand identities and the visual elements of a brand. But how long's it been? Like, is it looking a bit tired? Like, when was the
Let me
last
jump in
time you
there
came
with
to work
that
on it?
one because I came to you when my brand and we were evolving, right? And everything I'd presented to you came from a place of a good heart, trying to do the best we could do. It captured as much as it could around what our culture was and values and even deliverables and corporate culture was, but it wasn't a brand. It was just a logo. So I want to talk you through it because remember when I showed you my stuff and then you eventually came back to me with this color palette, like literally this. So I remember always liking the logo, especially with the two lines, right? And you gave us this beautiful presentation of why it's powerful, right? Because you tell the story. I love the logo. What was my reaction? You can tell the people, what was my reaction when I saw the color palette?
Oh, the color palette. What did you want? You wanted black and white, I think.
I mean, look, I'm a simple man. Like I love black in logos. I love it sharp and crisp and everything else. I think our branding is that, but in my head, you shattered the paradigm of what I thought our logo and brand would look like. Even though they're two separate things, I was operating under a logo mentality. You brought in a brand narrative. And that's what I think we're trying to shift in this conversation is people have a logo mentality. If I just get a logo, I'll win. But actually, you shifted me to a brand narrative.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the biggest thing there is perspective.
You mentioned me with the color palette.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, literally one word, perspective. You saw it from one point of view, yours.
Yeah.
And while like you're the business owner, it is your business, but you were seeing it from what you could see.
Yes.
And so when I gave you a color palette, it was based on something that had a different perspective.
Yeah.
I don't know if everyone can see it, but the background of what we're speaking on is a satellite photo of the coastline of Australia. And the original photo has these beautiful colors in it where it's the sea meets the sand, meets the earth, meets the land rather. And yeah, our color palette is literally built off that. It's literally built off a different perspective, which is exactly what Stone is offering as well. Like the Stone Creative Group is just offering a different perspective to the one that you're seeing.
Yeah, and thank God that you changed it from black and white, man, because that would have been my whole story. But the thing is, like, because I remember you showing it to me, and I remember seeing the navy and going, "Yep, awesome." I remember I think navy was the only color I liked on the palette. When you showed me the green, and the biggest stretch for me was that golden color of the sand in that satellite photo, the one that's in the bottom corner of this live stream. And you really disrupted me as a business owner because you saw something I couldn't see. And if left to my own devices, I would have stayed in my like space of, well, I'm the person that should know everything about it. But actually, because of your specialty, you brought in a brand narrative rather than just a logo mentality. And I fought you on it for a little while because I was like, I don't know about that color, man. I don't know about that color. I don't know about that. But eventually, as you took me on the journey, and I just want to tell everyone who's watching this, is that the way Tony explained things to me wasn't, I'm the creative, you should listen. And then I wasn't coming back to him as I'm the guy that's leading the company, so I should have the final say. We actually had to both come in with a relational attitude to go, well, what's best for the brand, not just our own personalities. And so I appreciated that from you, because you took me on the journey of just trust me, this color will work. And then over, like, I would have to say 2 weeks, it started to really build roots into us as a company. And I'm so appreciative of the fact that we went on that journey. So if you're a business owner out there and you're stubborn and you see things from only your perspective, this is the beauty of having a creative branding specialist say, let me show you what your brand could possibly look like and be.
Yeah, absolutely. And to go even further with your question, like how should people address this for themselves? Really focus on what your organization is about. So I'm talking about like pulling up those Word documents that you've got saved somewhere from back in the day, the ones that have your mission statement and your values on it.
Yeah.
I tell you what, revisit them, make sure they're up to date, because that is so core to your brand and to how it's going to outwork, that you need to be secure on those things before you even talk to a designer.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so once people gather that, they have all their documentation. What's the one, like, I mean, we're talking about how do people self-assess their brand. I don't know, have you finished that particular journey with us yet, or are we going off on a tangent?
Look, I think once you have a few set rules around your brand identity and your brand communication, you can really start to explore where it goes from there.
Yeah.
So I'm even thinking about someone like Old Spice. I don't know if you really know their branding journey too well.
Yeah.
You might remember the new ads with the guy on a yacht.
On a yacht, a horse, all that's
yeah, I'm on a horse. Yeah. If you look back at their branding and their marketing journey before that, it took them so long to work out even what their core audience was.
Okay.
That they were a men's deodorant brand for so long that they were advertising to men, and it was the moment that they stopped doing that they realized that their core business was not going to rely on just that.
Yeah.
they started advertising to the partners.
Yes.
Like, literally,
because they do the shopping, right?
Exactly. Yeah. They're the ones that make the decision. Love you, honey. But it's like the moment that they realized that they were on the wrong track, they were able to steer the right way. And you got to just know that your brand is secure enough to do something like that.
Absolutely. And I mean, look, Harley Davidson is famous for saying, you know, they don't sell motorbikes, they sell the idea of freedom to middle-aged men, you know? And so it's one of those things and this is why part of this conversation was, what does your brand say when you're not there? Like, what is it saying underneath that? You know, Black & Decker is famous for saying, we don't sell drills, we sell holes in the wall. You know, so what is underneath that? So here's a beautiful one for you, is what are some do's and don'ts of developing a person's brand? You know, I can see lots of people that are writing questions and conversations. Don't worry, we will get to them. And we will even answer maybe in another video or even in the comments. But tell us, Tony, what are some of the do's and don'ts of developing a brand?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think we'll start with the don'ts, because it's easy to start there. But I think the biggest thing for your brand is don't change it on a whim or to follow a trend. You really have to be secure in the idea of rebranding. It's not a small undertaking. And I would even go as far to say challenge those ideas. Challenge the reasons that you've decided to rebrand. Like, it's not for the faint of heart, for sure. But
Yes.
it may not even need it. You may be losing some brand equity that you've got built over years with your current clients. And yeah, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, is the old saying. But you don't want to lose what's been already built. So if you don't feel like it's going to achieve anything by rebranding, I would suggest just stop right there.
Yeah.
Really think about it. But I think that goes into the next thing to do, and that's to get outside information.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You're, as a business owner, you're too close.
Yes.
You like we were talking about, you had one perspective on what your brand was going to look like. So
Totally.
you saw one thing. But,
I had an idea. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And you've got your blinders on. You need somebody that's seeing the rest of your business, the rest of your brand, to really be like the voice of reason in that situation. So yeah,
Tony, we've got a couple of live questions right here. I'm going to read them to you.
Absolutely.
If that's okay. One is from our great friend Christy, who says this: "Hey Tony, when should people brand under their own name or choose another brand name? Do you ever work? I'm trying to read this question. Sorry. Do you ever keyword research into a brand name, or is it something entirely different? Do you ever work with keyword research into a brand name, or is it something entirely different?"
Wow, that's actually a really big question. I personally think that when you start operating under your own name, you can't change your name. So if you become, oh gosh, it's like if you start getting negative reviews on Facebook, you can't just like
separate it from you. Okay.
You can't separate it from you as a person.
Yeah.
I would probably be going for another name first. Keyword research into a brand name. That's so specific to a client, to an organization that that's a little tricky. I would probably avoid using your own name unless you were really secure in what you were doing.
Yeah. And from a communications perspective, so Christy, I know you, and right in the beginning, and it's funny we're talking about names because the Stone Creative Group has my surname in it. However, and Dave Taylor's just written a brilliant comment up there. It is that when we talk about names, if it's your first name and second name, now I'm talking from a leadership communications perspective, it's very difficult to build legacy on that. It's very difficult to build a long-term narrative, because what you're saying subconsciously to everybody is this whole business is built on my gifting and ability. So therefore my multiplication factor, my growth factor, my scalability can be limited. Now it's not the be all and end all. Like, you can run a business successfully using your own name, but the fact is that it has some restraints to it. And I think it would be it would translate also to branding if everything's built around your name. I mean, fashion labels are, but again, they've been able to transcend it being built around one person, and they've made it about design. So you've got to know, I think you've got to marry your name with a particular deliverable, and then test whether it's a viable thing to have your name associated with it, or do I create a brand that's separate from me that I can get some release from if I ever were to sell it? So Dave Taylor made a brilliant point, who is, again, an award-winning entrepreneur, and he's right here on our Facebook Live. He said, and it's a brilliant point, is that it's very difficult to sell a business, if you plan on ever selling it, if it's built around your own name, because people will follow the name rather than the business. So if you ever want to have the goodwill, if you're going to sell it, you possibly need to have some layers that go beyond your name. The other question is, how do you take, and it's from one of my best friends in the world, Linda Partridge, all the way from Invercargill, New Zealand. It's the question, this is a great question, Tony. How do you take people on the journey whose pace is slower than your own? This is a brilliant question for especially our world. How do you do this?
With great patience. Look, sometimes that's actually not a bad thing. Sometimes a little bit of breathing in the process is beneficial to the process.
Yeah.
For myself and for Stone, we go through a process where we actually start with a brand questionnaire that really starts the journey of exploring what your organization is about, who you are, who's involved, who are the key players, and I think that on average that usually takes a good 1 to 2 months before we even hit the ground with anything like that, because it is so important. You do want to be taking your time. So I would say that in terms of people that you don't hear from a month or a couple of weeks or something, it's probably best case scenario. It means that you've got time to really open up the brain tanks and really get some good thought and research around the direction that you're going to go with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And to bring some support to that, because I understand Linda's context as well. I've known Linda for well over a decade, nearly 15 years now, and over that maybe. And the journey, Linda moves really fast. She's a go-getter. She's a doer. And sometimes like people that move really fast are surrounded, like especially people that are leaders of their own businesses can be frustrated by people that move slower. It would be almost like if I got you on the branding journey, I'm ready to execute and engage on it, but I've got a group of leaders or people that are close to me that are slower in the uptake. You know what I mean? And so I think it's a little bit of, well, how do we take people on the journey, maybe speed up the process a little bit? And I think that some of it, Linda, is, and this will probably help a lot of people watching this, is how do you take people who process at a slower rate to you? The benefit of not just doing it all in your own strength or in your own mindset is now it's not just a personal thing. When people take slow to process, if everyone took slow to process my branding or what I would consider branding, but really was only a logo, I'd be offended by it. But because I've got an external party that's in here with a specialty in it, and you've got the documentation to back it up and to speed it up, I think documentation is actually a key here to speed up people's buy-in.
100%.
Because that's what you've done for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's it's actually another thing that I would suggest doing when you start talking about do's and don'ts for developing your brand. It's like to involve your entire team. Because when we start talking about brand as a whole, that includes your brand's culture. And when you start thinking about a brand, like Andrew, you accidentally quoted Jeff Bezos before, your brand is what people say about you after you leave the room. So that's a really interesting point, because it's not talking about just you, one person. That's talking about you, your business, the people that they talk to on the phone, the people that customers see at the front desk, the people that get their signature on their invoice. It's every single person in your organization is part of your brand, and you need to involve them if you are going to be recreating or refreshing your brand as well.
Absolutely. So walk us through we're going to finish up shortly. We've got a great question from a great friend of mine who, again, I just love seeing all the people that I love on this feed. And it's Pastor Rod Gilchrist. And I've been with you in your journey for years now. He's just asked, how would you refresh a brand that has decades of marketplace exposure and make it pop again? And again, that context is over 3 decades of being a flagship brand on the Gold Coast. What do you do with that?
Yeah. So in this particular question, I would probably read brand as logo. I think we're talking about here, or a brand identity visually.
Yeah, I think it would be, how do you refresh a brand?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I wouldn't say that a refresh is a shorter process than a full rebrand.
Okay.
But there are simple things that you can do, even down to the idea of freshening up a color palette. You know, you
Yeah.
can keep the same logo. Like, you don't necessarily need to change a logo if you've got a strong and established logo in the market. Maybe a different color, or maybe a bit of a supporting brand or a tagline that would just kind of bring
Yeah.
new life to it. When you start talking about logos, like, let's see some big players like Coca-Cola. You know
Yeah.
the logo, you know the typeface and the ribbon on it, but you can see a billboard that's red and got a white wavy stripe across it, and you know exactly what that's for.
That is
You
very
know,
true. Yeah. It doesn't
so
even
your
need the words Coca-Cola on it.
exactly your logo can take a back seat, and if you've established a brand that can communicate without the
Yeah.
logo being pride of place,
Yeah.
you can definitely refresh a lot and say a
So
lot by not
the,
changing much.
so the answer for Rod is, Rod, yes, you can refresh it. It just may take a little bit of what you'd consider color disruption. It may take a little bit of looking at different shapes, maybe, because I know that in the social media world that we're living in, suddenly the templates have changed the game where, you know, with Instagram and LinkedIn and everything, you know, you've got to be able to have brand that has like just a simple letter in it, or a circle or a square, or it has to fit a particular, you know, little icon. Walk me through that quickly as we bring it to a close.
Or a language change,
Yeah.
even.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned social media there, and that's probably the most important part of
Yeah.
the market at the moment. It's definitely come to the fore a little bit, while everyone can't be there in person. Sometimes the language that you're responding to people on your social media,
Yeah.
are you operating as a friendly responder, or are you responding with precision, and you're using Oxford commas, you like proper grammar? Look, there's so many things that you can change within your brand. It's just,
Mhm.
I think you've just got to be careful to remain true to it.
Yeah, absolutely. To bring a little bit of closure to, you know, Christy's comment about names, because there is something about your name. We all have it in our businesses. I've got my surname in mind. Originally, when we first started traveling, it was Andrew Stone Ministries. I took my first name off it. Now, I want people to hear this and the why, and only left it as Stone, because now with the Stone Creative Group, it isn't just built around me, it's built around legacy, not just people that are in my family, because Stone is quite a generic, it's something in nature, it just happens to be my surname. But Creative Group is actually now what defines us, rather than the surname. And so if you're going to use something in your name, put something after it that defines it as something a lot bigger. That would be my closure on that conversation.
Yeah, that's a brilliant point. Absolutely.
And so, Tony, we're going to finish up. What would be, there are people watching there. I mean, there's going to people, you know, finishing, you know, they're going to watch this even post this live event. You are our branding specialist. You've taken us on a journey. You've taken many organizations now on a journey. They are not just our clients, but they're our friends. You've had the ability to sit in the room and talk about their whole narratives. There are people watching this that need help with their brand. What should be the first thing that they think of or think through when connecting?
Wow. Yeah. Talk to us.
Yeah. That is an
um,
unashamed plug right there.
yeah, absolutely. Not gonna apologize for that. But I think those couple of points I made, don't change if it's not necessary. If your
Great.
brand is still strong, stick with it, commit to it. Sometimes it just needs a little bit more energy put into it. And I
Yeah.
know that it's hard for some people to really get the right things on social media or don't know how to go about it. Get some outside advice, but make sure that you talk to people that are experts in the industry.
Yeah.
Don't get your secretary to knock up a logo and send it out, please.
No.
That's not gonna
Yeah.
that's not gonna help your brand. That's just gonna change the picture on your Facebook. So
Yeah.
yeah, and I think the other part to that is don't think that your brand logo, don't think that your logo is going to fix deep-seated issues in your business.
Yeah. Good
That
point. Good point.
it'll only be a band-aid in those situations. So if
Yeah.
there's other things, just make sure that once you start approaching your branding, that your business is solid,
Yeah.
because you don't want to slap a new band-aid on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember back in the day, like when you thought just having a business card meant you were in business. You know what I mean? It was like, oh, like I've got a business, so I'm going to get a business card printed, but you've got no clients, you've got no customers, you've got no connections, you've got nothing, but you've got a good logo. But back then it was like using Microsoft Publisher or something, and you make up this little logo, printed on some cards. So, so I get all of that. What we're saying is, don't take that mindset and just do it fancier now with the technology that we have. But at the end of it all, if there is a deep well of organizational culture and clarity, your brain should speak into that. It really should be the wellspring of everything that is in the depths of your business and your vision, your mission, your culture, your clarity, your values. And we are so privileged that you would be with us this evening. Thank you so much, Tony, not only for fixing my slides, but for speaking and challenging my color palette. And for the record, it took me like 2 weeks. So leaders, listen to me. Don't say no straight away. Sit with it before your stubbornness tells you get rid of it. You know, sit with it. If at least then you know if you love it, if it's grown on you, or if you hated it. If after 2 weeks you hate it, you don't want it. But if after 2 weeks you're like, actually, you know what, that's got some merit, let it soak into, let's take root. So we appreciate you. Go on the journey. We'd love to go on the journey with you. Write your comments. And I am, again, so grateful to you, Tony, not only fixing my slides, fixing our branding, but then actually taking us on and becoming part of our team to help other people and other organizations and other businesses and clients tell their story well. Tony, you're a gentleman and a scholar with an epic beard. And we love you heaps. We love you being part of our team. We love our whole team, and we love everyone who's watched, and we appreciate you all. If you have any questions, please let us know. Also, we are doing live Q&A with our whole team next Thursday, the 7th of May. We are actually doing it in a Zoom call. So if you're watching this, there are going to be particular frameworks that we have to engage with you in order for you to have access to that Zoom call. So hit us up on our Facebook, even in the comments, and just say I'm in for the Zoom call, or just say Zoom or whatever, and we will contact you. And what we're going to ask for is that you tag people, that you get people involved, and we will send you the link to our Zoom call with our whole team. And in essence, it's a live Q&A consult with the whole Stone Creative team. And so, like I said before, we appreciate you. Thank you for being a part of our journey and letting us be a part of yours. So good night, and we look forward to seeing you next Thursday.